So I was just in my room and I was reading and I was about to go to sleep and I heard my phone go off. One of my friends sent me a picture of my brother with like cuts on him, and it was posted on Facebook.
Madison Legg is a 17-year-old high school senior in Colorado Springs. Someone apparently saw the Facebook post and called police.
The moment I saw it, the cops were banging on the front door, the exact moment. And so there's no time to go downstairs and see what happened.
2 years ago, her world was shaken by her brother Jacob. In a tragic moment, Madison and her family will never forget.
And I couldn't bring myself to open my door though and leave my room because I heard my mom crying in the living room. I thought I should write about it.
She keeps a journal, and there's an entry for November 2nd, 2014.
I wrote exactly what I saw in the picture that was sent to me and just what my brother looked like.
At that moment, she realized she may have lost her best friend.
I started crying, and it was very hard to cry when I was writing this. I couldn't cry anymore. I was so angry at my brother because he's my best friend. I was angry that I didn't even know, and I was angry at him and myself.
Hi, I'm John Ferrugia. Welcome to Insight. We hear about the tragedy of suicide almost daily in our state. The mother who kills herself and her children, the father who simply can't face daily commitments, the depressed young person who is unsure of the future. Colorado has the 5th highest suicide rate in the country, but even more troublesome, suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death among Colorado's youth, ages 10 to 24. It's a problem affecting thousands of families in our state, yet no one seems to want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable and because there's a social stigma. But one woman in Colorado Springs is not uncomfortable and is committed to beginning a difficult conversation. Inside reporter Maribel Gonzalez introduces us to Madison Legg, a young high school filmmaker who shares her family's own experience with suicide in a documentary she produced. We think it has a message that all of us need to consider. It's called Under the Wire.
November 2nd, 2014. 7 p.m. Tomorrow's my dad's birthday. And to kick it off, my brother Jacob posted an image on Facebook saying he was going to end his life. The picture of him was with a cut on his right wrist and a cut on his neck. He had his oversized corduroy jacket hanging behind him, with his glasses a little low on his face. Around 10:30 p.m., the police showed up at our house looking for my brother. Sure enough, they find him downstairs. They wanted to take him to the doctor. I heard one cop saying my brother had mental issues. I'm grateful my brother didn't end his life. The sick thing, though, is I knew he was suicidal. 11:22 p.m. Just if you're referring to me, say you.
You.
I'm right here.
Okay, but Maddie, you can't talk to me like this with gum in your mouth because I can't understand you. My name is Rachel Legg, and I was a teacher for 35 years, and now I am retired. We decided to adopt 3 children, Anna from Guatemala, Madison from Cambodia, and Jacob, who is from Guatemala. We had just arrived in the United States. Here this scared little 20-month-old baby boy was going with this strange woman. And then we got in a car and came to a strange home, took him in the house, and there were 2 little girls standing in the kitchen waiting for Jacob to come home. And I set him down on the ground and he stood there almost paralyzed until Madison, you, walked over and put your arm around him and walked him into the living room. And then he had big smiles on his face and it was all right. It was okay.
So, you know I love you. You're my brother. Do you love me?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, very much.
Aw, yay!
Yes, so I may say, rude comments about you. That comes from the heart.
Oh, that's good to know, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, no one in the family wanted to talk about, and you didn't want to talk about it first, so I know you're sort of reluctant, so I'm very happy you did this.
I don't know, I just kind of wish people didn't play it off as if it never happened, because it did. And though it is in the past, you shouldn't act like it isn't there, because it always will be.
What even brought you to the decision to harm yourself in the first place?
There was a point at the junior high where just like, I'd always eat lunch by myself. If I was even eating lunch, because I would always like to be by myself during that time. Playing the piano in Miss Gilbert's room, or just reading a good book, but I would always be by myself. When you don't know your origin of where you came from, you don't know yourself. People who are not adopted, they know themselves because of genetics. I might have gotten this from my dad, I could have gotten this from my mom, but I don't know.
Is that the reason you wanted to kill yourself?
I had gone through this really bad breakup. I found out that she cheated on me. She said, "Jacob, it's true, I did find someone better." It was pretty overwhelming for me, and I just really didn't want to live with the pain.
We would go down and try to get him to talk to us, and he wouldn't, and he would keep telling us everything's okay, and that, your dad and I knew that was a big red flag, but you can't make a kid talk to you. You can keep trying and trying and trying, and we checked with the school, and they said he seemed to be happy at school, so we couldn't figure out what was going on. I had gone down and told him good night, and he seemed very happy. And I went upstairs to go to bed, turned out the lights, went to bed, and the next thing I knew, there were policemen knocking on the window, which we couldn't figure out what was happening. We thought it might be something around our house, not inside our house. And so when they told us about Jacob, I was in total disbelief.
It's crazy almost losing a life, then celebrating another a couple hours later. At my dad's birthday dinner, we pretended it didn't happen. It was a circus, and my brother's suicide attempt was the elephant in the room. What does it mean to fail at trying to kill yourself?
After I realized that I'm not dying, that I know I'm going to live, it kind of told me that it's not my time yet, that I need to keep on living.
So, has it ever been a reoccurring thought of you wanting to kill yourself?
No, but I've always thought of what would happen if when I attempted suicide and actually succeeded with it, what would have happened in the aftermath of, everyone else.
What do you think will happen? Did that stop you?
Yes, it did, because during the process, I started thinking, what are you doing? Okay, this is gonna hurt so many people. Why are you doing this?
I remember a cop came down the hallway and said you had mental issues, and it made me really mad, because you don't, I don't think, and they kind of just wanted to send you off, and I couldn't do that because you're like my best friend.
The cops really didn't know me, they just made assumptions, but with the parents, it's kind of a different story, and with what they said, kind of just showed me I'm very important to them and they don't want to lose me, but they also really still don't know me completely.
I just said, "Are you okay? What can I do for you? What's going on? What's bothering you? How come you didn't talk to us before this?" There was no indication whatsoever with Jake that he was going to do anything like this.
I just really never know how to bring up this kind of conversation with them, you know, because there's never really that right time to really bring up such an emotional subject. Because with Dad, he'll cut me off and say, no, you don't, or say, well, no, instead of doing that, you should do this, and think he's right. Granted, there will be times he is, but there are times where he isn't, and I'm not really explaining myself. If I talk to him face to face about it, that's what's gonna happen. I really haven't told anyone else. If other people didn't want to bring it up, then why should I?
Well, thank you for telling me. Because I'm happy to have my best friend, because you're like my twin, basically, and I don't know what I would do without you. I need you. I just was so happy that you're like right in the other room and you're there and present and you're happy.
You know, it makes me feel like I didn't know you were thinking that. I mean, I knew that you must have had thoughts about that night, but I never really knew what they were, and now that I know, it's kind of, I'm glad to hear it.
You're needed a lot. A lot of people adore you. A lot of your friends, I'll check in with them, ask if you're okay, always. So, besides being preachy, I've been debating through this whole entire interview whether I should tell you or not, just because of parents and stuff like that. But the day you tried to kill yourself, that was the last day I cut myself. And it felt like bullshit. Like, did I really do that? And I remember how easy it was. That's not blame at all to parents or anything like that, because you don't know what's gonna happen, but it's so easy to get blindsided. I do know how you felt. And we didn't talk to each other. And we did have a lot more in common than you thought. So, I'm happy I told you.
I didn't really know that you had cut yourself in the past. And I'm just kind of glad that I actually know.
A lot of people are good at putting on an act. And you don't know that they're hurting themselves, or you don't know that their whole world could be crashing down, just like how it felt for you.
The way I see it, the first step is always the hardest. And that first step is reaching out to at least one person. My life is better, and I don't see myself going back to that place. But if at some turning point it does, you will be one of the first people I talk to about it, to get help.
Do you want to know what happened in the interview, or?
I think I want to be surprised.
Okay.
I'll take a big box of tissues, though.
Yeah.
I have a question, though.
Oh, okay.
Did he ever wonder if he was loved by us? Was that ever a concern of his?
No.
Good. I've seen a lot of difference with him. I think his world right now is okay. He's very open, talks to your dad. They have lots of long conversations, which is very healthy. He has you. I'm very, very thankful for that.
Are you planning on showing this journal entry to Jacob one day?
Probably. He needs to know that I wanted to remember, even though it was a terrible thing that happened. You still need to be able to remember and look back and learn. I've never thought about what it would be like if my brother actually did die. It would have affected a lot of people, a lot more people than he would have known, loved him, and cared about him.
I'm joined now by Insight reporter Maribel Gonzalez and filmmaker Madison Legg. And Madison, in a very, very impressive film. You said in the film that your family didn't talk about it, doesn't talk about it. Does it now?
Yeah, very open conversation about it. And I think it's just because we're more open about what happens in our everyday lives, so it's easier to just talk about things that are harder now. So it's definitely a very open conversation now.
So this event really helped your family open up?
Yes, definitely more helped it, yeah.
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 Great. Joining us to discuss the issues surrounding suicide are the State Health Department's Director of Suicide Prevention, Sarah Brummett, and Dr. Abigail Tucker, who is the Clinical Director of the Community Reach Center in Westminster, who deals with this issue on a daily basis. Thank you both for joining us. Is talking about issues of depression, crisis, or isolation amongst family or friends, is that one of the antidotes to suicidal thoughts or actions?
By reducing stigma with open communication, we know that we can have a direct impact on the rates of suicide attempts and completion. I think Madison's example is a great one about how talking about something that is very difficult and very raw can open up a conversation for more transparency, and we know that people who are willing to talk about it are willing to seek treatment.
But in the state of Colorado, we're the 5th most prolific state in terms of suicide. Why is it? Why would we in Colorado, I mean, everybody who lives in Colorado seems to be, relatively excited about being here, at least that's on the surface. Why do we have this statistic?
Yeah, suicide is a very complex and personal issue, and so if we had one thing that was driving our numbers to the top, we could do one solution, but it's very complex, and there's plenty of hypotheses out there about why we experience this in the Rocky Mountain West, which is something that's shared with our neighboring states as well, and there's a number of things that influence suicide here. One of the big ones is our Western mentality, that cowboy, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get through it.
Don't get help.
Right, that stigma that I should be able to do this on my own, but if you're struggling with a mental health condition, you don't have to do it alone, and sometimes you can't. And so really that stigma is very present here in the West, as well as we have vast stretches of isolated areas, very rural areas that might not have the same access to resources, that can certainly affect things.
Suicide is the second leading cause of death for people in the ages of 10 to 24, so it's affecting our youth. Why is that?
I think there's a number of stressors that our youth have, and making sure that they know that it's okay to reach out, it's okay to be experiencing something and move past it and connect with help, and making sure that it's okay to talk about things can really help change those numbers. And so highlighting stories like Madison and her family in terms of help is possible, recovery is possible, you're not struggling alone, you're not the only one who's dealing with this issue, can help change our conversations that we're having.
Abigail, on the clinical side, you're dealing with people every day who are in crisis or near crisis. We see these categories. We're just talking about different folks who are under pressure. Jacob in this film was a person who's adopted, was talking about his identity, who am I? Are there certain categories of kids or individuals that you see more stress around their identities? Is identity an issue?
Identity is an issue for any of us, that when we don't have the channels of communication To talk about something that is challenging us in our identity can definitely be a stressor. Thinking about adolescence specifically, keeping in mind that the adolescent brain as it's developing, we know a lot already about their impulsivity around what they are questioning and curious about. And if you combine that with a taboo subject such as suicidality, and they don't have the channels or don't know who they can safely talk to about the issue, that for me is going to be a red flag, and you're going to see why you're going to increase rates. And then if you add other identity or other taboo topics, we know that our LGBTQ population, especially in adolescents, has a higher rate of suicide attempts and completion. And again, what you're seeing is multiple taboo topics, reduced comfort as a society, as parents, as school to talk about it. And when we're not talking about it, then we're definitely not connecting people to treatment or even just to peer support. Not everybody who is suicidal is mentally ill, and not everybody needs treatment, but you definitely have the right to be able to talk about it without judgment.
You talked about gay and transgender kids, and the rate in Colorado is almost double any other group. What's the outreach in your at a clinical level? What are you doing in a state level? Is there outreach specific to that?
It's not these gender identities or sexual orientation that is causing negative mental health outcomes. It's the bias and the stigma and the discrimination that individuals face on a daily basis.
Right.
And so having trusted adults that you can go to for whatever issue you're dealing with, having safe spaces where you feel included and respected, that is what protects our youth regardless of what they're struggling with. But it especially protects our LGBTQ youth who might be struggling.
Colorado has recently released a really expansive crisis system that is really reaching all four corners. What I would offer, though, is that it's never enough, and especially was chatting to Madison earlier around something that I'm eager to learn from her, is that how do we tap into social media and other outlets where we know that adolescents and teens are likely to seek information and seek approval, to help them tap into resources that have been built? How do we make those connections?
We know that in rural areas, the suicide rate is much higher. I know that you said it was a lack of resources, perhaps. What other reasons, what other stresses are there in those areas that may be causing these rates?
I think there's definitely unique issues that are occurring in our rural and frontier communities. Access to resources is just one of them. There's also the very real stigma of, if I let someone know that I'm struggling, what does that mean? And if it's a small community, then will everyone find out, and what happens then? So that fear piece about what happens if I do need help really prevents people from taking that step or seeking out the resources that are there. We also see households with firearms are much more prevalent in rural communities, and so we see our firearm suicide rates are much higher there as well.
There are a lot of great resources online that can give parents the tools and schools the tools they need to open up this conversation, because the best intervention is a home in which it's an open conversation. That's a protective factor that is not about any type of state resource. It's the best intervention, and so really my first line of defense is asking parents and schools what is their comfort to talk about it, and how can I get them connected to tools like mental health first aid or family support coaching so that they feel comfortable opening up this conversation in their household.
Parents are going to be watching this, students are going to be watching this. Obviously, friends of yours, Madison, would be watching this. What are the red flags? What do I look for as a parent or as a classmate? What is it I'm looking for, especially over the holidays? A lot of people get a little depressed over the holidays. You said before and after the holidays is a big time where people come in crisis. So what are the red flags? What do you look for? What do you tell people?
And certainly things that you'd want to pay attention to is if someone's talking about suicide or talking about death or being a burden, feeling like they're in pain. That's something to pay attention to and take very seriously. If someone is isolating, withdrawing from activities or friends, changes in sleep patterns, all of those things where something is not right, and maybe the issue is not suicide, but it's always okay to ask, just to let them know that if that is the issue, we can talk about it, and you can talk to me about it.
Something that when you're thinking about red warning flags, in addition to everything that Sarah stated, also just looking for silence and looking for isolation. And so if you typically had a really gregarious teenager who's been disconnecting and detaching, how are you opening up that conversation? There's a line in a lot of anti-bullying messages that says that for peers and family, we're not going to stand by and let bad behavior happen. The same is true for suicide. How do we make it a public health where it's a universal screening, it's an open conversation like wearing your seatbelt, and with that type of open conversation, we don't have to worry about what are the red flags. We're screening people in advance.
Well, and you talked about that, Madison, in the film, that your brother was very isolated. That was one of the red flags for you.
Yeah, that was a red flag, but I think it's important to not go into the mindset of there's going to be red flags, because it won't start as red, basically. You really have to pay attention from the beginning, and it definitely won't be looked for. It'll actually probably catch your attention. You just have to make sure to take it into account.
Thank you all for the discussion. It's a very important discussion. We could talk much, much longer, but we're out of time. But it's important to know if you or a friend or a family member needs help, even right now, you can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, or call the Colorado Crisis and Support Line at 1-844-493-TALK. In either case, you're going to be connected to a skilled, trained counselor at a crisis center in your area, and you can do that anytime, 24/7. Or you can reach out to the Colorado Office of Suicide Prevention online. You can go to www.coosp.org. That's our insight for tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Ferrugia. Good night.